Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of Libero TV. I'm your host for today, Dan. Welcome along and thank you for joining us. Just a quick reminder for people, if you would like to get involved and interact in the stream itself, you can do so in the chat room. Make sure you're logged in through your Google account and you should see click to join the chat either to the right hand side or underneath the video, depending if you're watching this on a mobile device or desktop PC. But yes, make sure you do have that account up and running and linked to your YouTube channel for joining in. And if you're having any troubles with that, feel free to give the office a buzz and one of the support staff will be happy to run you through that process. We've got a bit of a special episode today, something a little bit different, so that's pretty exciting. As I said, I'll be playing the anchor role today, just jumping in between all the questions and whatnot. And I have Selena sitting beside me on a more technical role.
Hi guys.
Actually, let me jump over to you there quickly,
Cool.
Selena.
Hi.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And Jeremy will be looking after the chat room and any of the chat questions that come through. Say hello, Jeremy.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so we have, as I said, a very special episode. Guest of honor, very, very special guest, independent consultant speaker, author, creator and editor of Library Technology Guides. You would have seen his work appearing on Computers in Libraries, a smart library newsletter published by the American Library Association, as well as many other titles, including Cloud Computing for Libraries. Marshall Brady, let me just bring you in here, Marshall. And hello, sir. How are you? How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing okay. So I'm delighted to be here. So I'm speaking on this program today from my home office in Nashville, Tennessee. It's morning for you, it's evening for me, but I'm delighted to be here and have a chance to speak with you and your and the attendees, your customers. So glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I'll get the show rolling. We do have a bunch of user supplied questions, and we'll also feel free to ask any questions you like in the chat room, and Jeremy will pass them along to us. So just to get the ball rolling, I have a questions for Marshall sheet right here in front of me. What tech are you impressed with at the moment? I'll pass it over to you.
Well, so, technology is an interesting thing. I've been studying it and working with it for, my whole career. And so, I've seen a lot of technologies come and go. And so it's just interesting to think, well, what's interesting now? What am I seeing now that's been maybe a little bit different, or what some of the earlier phases have culminated into? Kind of start that, leading into that, I think that, well, libraries are often kind of maybe a little bit slower than the rest of the tech community when it comes to adopting technologies. So a lot of things that we think about, may be in a different part of the adoption cycle than you see in the rest of the world. That said, the kind of things that I'm interested in that I think are important to libraries are a few different ones. I mean, it was interesting that you mentioned my Cloud Computing for Libraries book, because that's one of the things that I think is kind of important now. That things are evolved to the point where technology is just so more accessible. Subscription-based technology, hosted library services, the threshold of difficulty is just so much easier than it was in the past. So, I think that cloud technologies are a good fit for libraries and are really helping libraries do what they do better. Most libraries aren't, populated with technologists and systems administrators and all of that to be able to make it work behind the scenes, but rather they're information oriented, they're user oriented. So to have more and more technologies that can be just launched through a web browser and used and do things that are ever more powerful than before, I think is really helping advance libraries quite a bit. So kind of the ongoing maturity and increasing adoption of hosted and cloud services by libraries. That's one thing that I observe. And I'm impressed that libraries are being able to do more of that. Another thread that I think is interesting are kind of any kind of technology that helps libraries kind of strengthen engagement with their communities. Lots of different ways of doing that. I think that I certainly see a lot of different tools and technologies and interfaces and different approaches to user experience that are really centered on kind of collaborating with users, drawing users into the collection and the services of libraries, to be able to target users with the right kinds of services at the right time. So, those are things that I see kind of maturing in the library realm that may have been in the broader business community used in kind of more commercial ways for a while. And then the third thing I thought I might mention is, kind of all of the, kind of predictive analytics, recommendation services, all of the things that are still kind of in this vein of user engagement, but are using kind of information about a particular user session and who the user is to be able to do ever better recommendations. Libraries for a long time have offered through their catalogs, if you're looking at these things, these are others that might be of interest, and that's what librarians do in person. So I see that we're really able to kind of master more technologies that are able to do that virtually as well. So, those are a few things that I see as culminating in the library space as being kind of technology-driven services that I think are helping libraries advance a bit. So, a couple of thoughts.
Excellent. So another one we've got here. So obviously a lot of people are joining us here from Australia. So compared to the US and even Europe, what are the differences, and is there anything we can learn from or be doing better?
Well, so it's interesting that, Australia was actually kind of one of the pioneering countries when it came to the world of library automation. So I think that you can always learn as you take a look at the global scene compared to what you're doing in your own city, state, or country. So, I would start out by saying that I consider Australia itself to be on par with what I see in much of the US and parts of Europe. When I think about the areas that, the geographic regions that I think are maybe the most advanced in libraries, that might be Scandinavia, where, the libraries are really well funded. They have standards for library service. They have, strong investments in technology, strong investments in content. Sweden and other countries have kind of a legal environment for ebooks that's very favorable to libraries. So, that I think is an area you can look to and learn things from. I know I do when I visit and learn about libraries. Lots of Asian libraries and Taiwan and China and Korea, some very advanced, more academic than public libraries, but all over there, you see kind of very large libraries that are able to provide kind of compelling services to their users. So comparing the U.S. and Australia is interesting. What I observe in the U.S. is kind of a lot of disparities. We have a lot of kind of great municipal library systems, New York Public, King County, lots and lots of great libraries, Seattle Public, Los Angeles Public, I just can't even think all the ones that I think are really impressive. And they're pretty well funded. They've got lots of branches, big central libraries, research library, and have made good investments in technology and buy great content, lots of ebooks and all of that. Yet you don't have to go very far outside the cities often to see small rural public libraries that are not well funded. And just have the bare minimum, barely have a website, barely have an automation system. Their collections are meager in print and maybe even more meager digitally. So, that's kind of what I observe is that, there, almost any, a lot of countries, you have to kind of look at the full range of libraries to kind of get a sense of kind of what it's like there. And I guess I keep looking for technologies and models of technology implementation and ways of funding libraries that kind of bring technology to kind of all libraries, whether they're big or small. So anyway, to kind of get back to the question, I see Australia and the US kind of being quite even in a lot of ways. And one thing that I would notice in Australia is that there's probably less of disparity. You go to the rural libraries, they're part of consortia or regional library systems and have pretty good access to technology. So that's what I think is kind of important all over, is that for libraries to find ways to cooperate and spread access to services and content and resources and all of that. So I think a lot of that's driven by resources and economy and so forth, and you can't paint it all with the same brush. So it's kind of a rambling answer, I think, but kind of reflects some of my observations of late.
Excellent. Go Australia, I say.
Yeah. Yeah, so Australia's great technology. I mean, I've been to Australia, many times, and I always enjoy seeing the libraries in Australia and kind of the good services and content that they're able to offer.
Awesome. So now we have that's my questions that I've got on my sheet. We now have some customer supplied questions, and for that I'm going to shoot over to the support room with Selena. Selena,
yes,
feel free to take it away.
So first of all, Kim from South Perth Libraries, he's interested in some of the FRBR RDA, so he wants to know what the latest news is on the linked data front.
Well, so I have opinions on both sides of that question. I think that when you look at the big picture, the library has lived in kind of an isolated information space for a long time. We've invented the MARC record formats, things like Z3950 as a search protocol. We have kind of contained systems that are library management systems and catalogs that are just kind of little silos in the web itself. And the rest of the information world is, about linked data, graph data, and those kinds of kind of more semantic expressions of data and how it's all connected. So it's not good that the library is isolated. So when you look at initiatives like linked data, that seems pretty important for making libraries more relevant on the web. So, what's the payoff to doing that? You want it so that as our users interact with the web, doing searches in Google and Microsoft Academic and Google Scholar and all those kind of things, that they'll easily land on the resources that libraries invest in and make available to their communities. But when we lived in this siloed universe, that's kind of pretty hard to do. So the idea is that if we were to revolutionize the realm of bibliographic description to something more oriented to linked data, that would give us better placement and access to our users via the web. So BibFrame is the framework that maps and expresses bibliographic information in a linked data kind of way. And that seems to be a good direction, I think. Library of Congress has come up with the initial version of BibFrame version 2 was released just months ago. So it's starting to get traction in limited ways, but it's getting some traction. More and more national libraries, very large digital initiatives and so forth are using BibFrame as a way to express bibliographic information. So I see that as a good thing. When you talk about, you said FRBR, I hear it pronounced Ferber. I think both of those are horrible names. It doesn't really roll off the tongue either way. We're talking about grouping and hierarchy, and we've given it this very complicated name that our users are never going to understand. Maybe they don't need to understand. But the problem with Ferber is that it kind of came after the realm of bibliographic description was kind of entrenched in a kind of more unit record expression in MARC 21. So what do you do? I mean, how do you get from one to the other? Library systems aren't doing a good job of making that transition. I think most library systems that I know of are pretty much built around a flat MARC record format. So when you think about, the billions of MARC records there are in the wild, the effort and the expense and the time to get to a new kind of data model in Ferber and a new bibliographic framework in BibFrame are going to be tough. So you think, an example that I often give is you think about AACR2 to RDA. So a new set of cataloging rules, essentially, framework for rules for catalogers to follow as they describe materials. So the move from ACR2 to RDA has been many, many years. It's been very, very expensive, all for a pretty tiny improvement when it comes to the way that those differences are expressed in library systems and library catalogs and discovery layers and so forth. So that makes me worry that, just implementing RDA has been extraordinarily difficult and expensive, and to go from MARC to BibFrame, I think, is an order of magnitude kind of more complex when you think about it on a global scale. So, it's all kind of complicated. And what does it mean to end users in public libraries, for example? What's important is that libraries and the systems that they use and the library staff who populate those really do all of that in a way that meets the needs of the of the users. So you can do that with MARC 21, you can do that with BibFrame, you can do it with AACR2, you can do it with RDA and so forth. So I really kind of take a pragmatic and a user-oriented point of view that in an ideal world, sure, you want to get to these more fitting technologies and architectures in the long term. But in the meantime, you just need to kind of get the work done of serving library users. So I see it being kind of a long transition that will, not happen anytime soon, I don't think, the complete transition. And it'll have a lot to do with kind of system developers and how they are able to build and deploy systems that kind of help libraries make this transition to these new types of data models and architectures that I've been rambling about.
Great. So I've got another question. This one is from Olga. So she's from our public library at Woollahra in Sydney. And she's interested in knowing what are the current and future applications of augmented reality and artificial intelligence?
Well, so it's interesting, I think, and so it's unlikely that libraries will use augmented reality to deliver their primary services anytime soon. It might be the next version of digital reference and those kind of things. So, there are some practical opportunities, but I think the real opportunity is more what I was talking about before in kind of the engagement category. It's not unlike kind of the makerspace movement in libraries. How can you entice and attract community members to come into the library by offering them technologies that they otherwise don't have easy access to? There's a long history of doing that, going back to internet connections, to Wi-Fi, to just printing, to 3D printing, and all of that. So community members have learned that libraries are good places to go to learn about the technologies that they've heard about, that are interesting, that they can benefit by. So that's kind of one aspect of augmented reality and virtual reality that I think libraries can kind of pretty easily get into. That they can offer equipment and demonstrations and content that allow users to kind of experience the technology, and that's a good thing. And as they experience that technology, it might improve their lives. It might mean that they're able, when they go to a job interview, to talk about the technologies that that firm might be using, and so forth, and say, yeah, I know about virtual reality. I've used it before, and I can tell you this or that about it. So kind of in the vein of having more technical literacy. So it's just gone up to that level these days. And and you see good practical aspects of it, that a lot of libraries and museums use virtual reality to do exhibits and tours and all those kind of things of their facilities. And it's just a great way to kind of present content and through kind of an interesting experience for users. So I think it's worthwhile. I think it's something that libraries can become involved with in positive ways, knowing that there will be another next best thing. I think that people aren't that excited about. Lots of libraries are doing it, but 3D printing was really the talk of conferences. Beginning about 3 or 4 years ago. A lot of libraries have that now, and they're trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? We're having to buy all these supplies, and it's kind of a production service. What's the business model for it? Is it still bringing people in when that technology is now more ubiquitous? So there will be other things like that in the future. So I think it's important to kind of always keep an eye on kind of what the next technology that libraries want to be thinking about and kind of help their users experience.
When we're thinking about the AI services, should libraries and patrons be aware of that they're giving up some sort of privacy to get this information?
Well, so yes, I mean, this an issue that libraries have to be careful about. So one of the fundamental things that is different about libraries is our value to guard the privacy of our users for the services and content that they use that we provide, which is not at all a value on the commercial side of the world, where you look at the developers of a lot of these technology. It's all designed to kind of mine information about a user to the fullest extreme and be able to use that information in whatever way that can be monetized. Advertising usually, but other things as well. So anytime a library engages in these kinds of new technologies, we have to make sure that we do it in ways that align with our values. So sure, there are ways to use artificial intelligence in order to produce predictive analytics and to be, there's new kind of discovery environments that are based on machine learning and artificial intelligence. And there are kind of products and services created in the library space that are kind of built with that concern for privacy in mind. Yet you look at a lot of the commercial products, the commercial marketing technologies and all of that, often pitched to libraries that really don't draw the same lines as libraries would when it comes to, kind of what information do we collect about the patron, what do we keep, what is shared, what is opt-in, what is opt-out. So, when you get involved in big data, algorithms that are driven off of that data and machine learning and artificial intelligence, you just have to think carefully about kind of what the implications are for how patrons that interact with that will be treated in regard to their data and their privacy and control over that. So it's a thorny issue. I think they're good technologies, but the privacy issue that you bring up is the one that I think we have to be careful with as we experiment and deploy these kind of technologies in production.
Okay. So, do we have any questions in the chat room?
Not yet, but I have a question.
Oh, just a second, Jeremy. There you go, sir.
Thanks, Dan. I have a question. So, Marshall, you mentioned before about the ebook licensing in Scandinavia being a bit more forward-thinking. I was wondering, what do you see the path now for vendors in ebook licensing and just providing content? What do you see vendors have to do to make it more accessible and to make it more, really embrace the digital format?
So it's a business problem more than technology problem. So as long as the publishers, those who produce and retain ownership of the content, their business model depends on being able to license that content to consumers, and libraries are one of their consumers. Libraries buy tons of content in the form of ebooks and audiobooks and digital media from publishers that are also selling it to end users. But the basic problem is that publishers see library lending as possibly eroding digital sales to consumers. So they're always trying to throttle that in some way. So we've seen all of these kind of creating pricing and licensing models that publishers have offered to library vendors in order to be able to lend that content to library community members. Then you can have one simultaneous user, you have to rebuy the book after 23 loans, pay 10 times retail for the item of content. So really not a library-friendly business model. On the technology front, the integration of library lending into library systems, library catalogs, and user devices is better than it's ever been. On most library management systems, you can search the catalog and see print and digital and audiobooks of any title that you want, be able to click download and view the material, which is way better than it was a few years ago, where it was just this very awkward, technical process that the user had to do to read the first ebook. So the technology has really advanced quite a bit. The business models not so much. And what's different about Scandinavia is that, it's a business model where every time a library lends a book, the publisher automatically gets some kind of revenue for that. So the publishers love it when the libraries lend material because it increases the revenue. It doesn't erode it. So those are the challenges. The business and the legal issues are much more difficult than the technical ones. So if you guys have kind of the magic that it takes to kind of make ebooks readily and cheaply available to libraries from the publishers, I think we're all waiting for something like that. But so far it's been kind of a long and difficult set of negotiations between the library community and the publishing community.
Yep. So I do have one last final question from Gabby at Central Coast Libraries. How can public libraries use technologies to improve community?
Well, so I think that's what it's all about. That what you want libraries able to kind of do things and offer services and content that will kind of be compelling to the users, that will draw users into the physical and digital presence. And how do you do that? Um, you've got to provide kind of a world-class user experience. It's got to be kind of easy to use, so easy to use, no one has to explain it to them. I think library websites tend to be a bit complicated. It's got to be personalized. I think that's what community members see in the commercial side. They, when you interact with the rest of the web, it just kind of wraps itself around you. It knows you. It's able to offer things that are interesting to you. So I think libraries have to be more in that mode of anticipating interest, making recommendations, just kind of offering relevant content and services before the community member even realizes that that's what they were looking for, kind of surprise and delight. And so, that's not easy to do. It's been something that, commercial organizations have been working on doing for a long time. I think that we can emulate some of that and not emulate other parts of it. But all in all, to kind of have this perspective of kind of anything, all the kind of patron-facing technologies are kind of built around this model of user engagement and kind of promoting the library into the world of their community members. So it's not any one thing. It's dozens of different ways to use computer-based interfaces and technologies and content and services to kind of become engaged with the user. So, not an easy answer, but sorry.
No, that's great. So that's it from our customer side. So unless there's anything else that you want to finish off with, and what about?
Yeah, so I don't have anything else. I'm glad to have a chance to chat for a few minutes. This has been an interesting program and great questions, and I hope to kind of stay in touch.
Well, Marshall, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. And you've obviously traveled the world, visiting the likes of Germany, Korea, Israel, Colombia, and I believe we're allowed to say now that you'll be coming to join us here in Brisbane, Australia for the Libero user group this October.
Yep, and I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Well, we will see you then, and thank you very much for joining us today. Very much appreciated.
Okay, good night and good morning.
Thank you.
Enjoy your sleep. We've got to wait a while. Yeah. Thank you, Marshall. Okay, so yes, thank you so much for joining us today for Libero TV. As I mentioned, Marshall will be joining us in October for the user group. So if you didn't get a chance to get a question submitted, I believe he'll be taking questions on the day for user group as well. Tickets are on sale now, so head over to libero.com.au and register to attend the user group. It should be a great weekend? How long do we go for, Selena?
2 days, 3 days. Yeah, can turn it into a weekend
if we want to. See how much we want to turn it into a weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't and you enjoy Libero TV. Want to come back for more? Hit that subscribe button and follow along on Libero TV. Actually, it's not liberotv.com.au. Sorry, it's libero.com.au/liberotv. On the website, you can find information about upcoming shows and also catch past broadcasts and watch them back if there was something you missed. So thank you once again from Dan, Selena, and Jeremy. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.